Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So welcome to this live in conversation series in conversation with some awesome people today. And today we're talking about SDG 9, which is industry, innovation and infrastructure. It's number 9 in our series of 17. So we're going right the way through all of the global goals. We've already had some amazing conversations with some really enigmatic people who are doing so great in moving the SDGs forward, not just in Pakistan, but the ripple effect that takes place globally as a result. This in conversation series is part of our response as a UN Global Compact to the UN General Secretary's request for business to do more. So we've responded to that by putting together this in conversation series, and alhamdulillah, we're proving to really rattle the cage, as it were, with what's happening in the world, but also representing what Pakistani business people and the business community are doing in sort of putting their stamp on the SDGs in that regard. So some interesting conversation to have today. Today we're joined by Mr. Sheikh, who's the CEO of Base Technologies. Welcome, Anis. And we have Ms. Kinza, Ejaz, who looks after sustainability at Chottani Industries. So you guys are absolutely amazing. I'm not going to do your introduction profile because that will take time. I want to get straight into the conversation. But for those people who are listening in today live, if you want to connect with Kinza or Anis, you can do so by finding them on social media, primarily LinkedIn. That's usually one of the better tools to connect with. And if you're going to be tweeting or Instagramming or whatever it is that you do on social media these days to capture moments, please remember the hashtag Uniting Business and obviously GCNP. So like I say, today's conversation is around industry, innovation and infrastructure. So it's a light conversation. There's no set questions per se, Anis and Kinza. I'm just going to throw some statements out there, and it's really for both of you to have a conversation with me around some of the things that we think are important. A little bit about some of the journey that you've taken as well, because that's important for our listeners and those people who are starting out on the SDGs journey. But also top tips and guidance on how to navigate selling the business case, if you like, for the SDGs. Now, we here at the Global Compact and yourselves already know the value of the SDGs and the lovely framework that it presents in advancing business, both from a commercial perspective, but also from a purpose perspective. But we still do have a lot of work to do, and we have near on 9 years to achieve that. So it would be interesting to hear from you, your stories and how that journey has been in terms of talking to your peers, to your seniors, to your colleagues about the value of moving beyond CSR and taking the SDGs forward in your companies, but also some of the things that we could look out for as well as we all try and understand what that space is. And as I said, apart from being this really beautiful framework, it's actually a very lovely language that we can all universally speak together as well. So, I look forward to the day where all businesses have adopted the SDGs in some way, shape or form. And, we're all having conversations very different to the kind that we'll have today. We've got a number of participants joining us today who are on the webinar. Hi guys, if you want to ask any questions, please drop your questions into the chat box. We have Nida with us who will be sort of managing that and asking me to then rephrase and reframe the question so I can ask it accordingly. So we've got a little bit of time. We'll get straight into it. So Kinza, I want to start off with you first. Just trying to understand a little bit about the journey that you've taken to get to where you are in terms of SDGs. And why it's important to you personally, and we'll come to why it's important to your company. And then Anis, I'd like to ask you the same kind of thing. What is it that's driven you to take time to find out about the SDGs and adopt them? So really from a personal kind of perspective, what SDGs mean to you? And then we'll go a little bit free flow with some structure in that as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for the introduction. My name is Kinza. I work at Chottani Industries. Chottani Industries, our sustainable ethos is being genetically eco-conscious when it comes to our sustainable developments, initiatives, infrastructure, and innovations. We believe we are kind to the people and natural resources around us. We're determined to make fashion more sustainable as a manufacturer. That's the future. And it's inevitable for us not to work on SDG 9. When we talk about our fabric innovations, our streamlined focus is on the longevity of the fabrics as we future-proof our fabrics with organic, recycled, and eco-friendly fibers. And for the love of our environment, we're adopting stringent policies that offset the carbon footprint for the well-being of our people and planet. We are organic cotton certified as a manufacturer. And with regards to our sustainable and resilient infrastructure, we are always looking for sustainable innovations and technologies. Hence, we are always exploring new technologies that reduce the consumption of water, enhances productivity, reduces energy consumption, elimination of toxic and harsh chemicals, and in achieving zero discharge by 2030.
And that's a really kind of succinct, formulated strategy, Kinza. And we'll come to that in a moment of how you've had to navigate to get that signed off.
Yeah.
And why is this SDG important to you? What is it about this particular SDG, SDG 9, that's really kind of, touched the point in the heart?
Well, to be honest, denim is one of the most heavy water, toxic, energy consuming fabrications. And for us, the hardest challenge faced so far is to offset the carbon footprint. And now we can proudly say that by adopting SDG 9, that we can show our transparencies in our business and how we've gotten to that level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, in conventional methods of making jeans, which basically uses 20 liters of water. And our aim is to achieve by 2030, we aim to use just a glass of water for the same process.
Right.
And
so,
we've sorry.
So no, please go ahead. I was just going to say that to move from using that much amount of water, that's got to be driven by something other than just the commercial aspect as well, yes. Right? Obviously, that there's a knock-on effect that if you're reducing your consumption of water, then that's going to have a net effect on your margins. What I'm trying to sort of get under the hood of is why do you think this is important to you as a company, but also individually as well, aside from the commercial benefits? Is it the right SDG to adopt? Does it make sense to do this because it has so many parallel knock-on effects?
Absolutely, this is the right SDG to adopt because we need innovation, we need technology, and without the infrastructure being in place, we can't get from the conventional methods to offsetting the carbon footprints, really, to be honest. And like I said, denim is one of the most toxic fabrics. Without using the right technologies right now, we can't get from this to offsetting the carbon footprint.
And obviously climate then plays a role in that as well, and the impact on climate. Anis, I'm going to come over to you. You come out from a slightly different perspective, right? Because you're the final decision maker in the company, if I want to call that. So if you get it, then everybody should get it, right? Kinza's had a little bit more of a different journey in trying to sort of get everyone on board. And I know her CEO is really supportive and keen on this. What's your journey been like? What's driving you to adopt this particular SDG? And is there another SDG that you would actually also like to adopt? Or is this just the one that made most sense?
Thank you, Bhavani Saab. My name is Anis Sheikh. As you've already introduced, I am the founder and CEO of an AI startup, Basis Technologies. So startups like ours essentially stem up from some kind of innovation, which is, I think, a building block of SDG 9. I also believe, and the reason why SDG 9 is so important to us is because infrastructure, innovation, and industry, in my view, is the backbone of all the other SDGs. I'll explain this when we go forward. So I'll just mention one fact about the infrastructure, and it will kind of help me elaborate my statement. So I'm sure most of us know that as of now, 60% of the world population can access internet, and that is like 4.6 billion people. 92% of those actually access internet using their mobile phones, and almost 100% of the world population live in a place which is directly uh, under a mobile network. On the other hand, according to WHO, only 45% of the global population, that is like 3.5, 3.4 billion people, use a safely managed sanitation service. So therefore, the preferences for infrastructure are different. What my interests always have been, if there is an infrastructure component which we kind of equate with the development, bear with me, you'll see where I'm going with this. Uh, I have a friend in Brazil, and we work a little bit on a few AI products. Not that any of it works. Uh, we were trying to establish a simplistic uh, factor of infrastructure which we can use to determine or directly equate with the output. So there is one infrastructure, and that is, in my view, is the power generation and the consumption. So, for example, why we are comparing Brazil and Pakistan, for example, is they are comparable. Brazil's population, I think, is about 212 million, and Pakistan is about, I guess, 220 million. So we are comparable. So here is the thing. Pakistan installed capacity is 37,000 megawatts, and Brazil's uh, capacity is 175,000 megawatt, which is almost 5 to 6 times that of Pakistan. Now, if you look at the GDP, Brazil's GDP is 1.8 trillion, which is almost 5 times that of Pakistan. And if we apply it to other things, for example, let's say if we had 2.2 billion USD in IT exports, which is our subject, if you multiply by 6, you get Brazil's IT export. So there is probably a direct correlation of infrastructure to growth, both at human level and commercial level. As for innovation, I have always believed that innovation is a cultural thing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in our culture, we do not necessarily appreciate or encourage innovation so much. But like people like ourselves now coming into industry, we're trying to innovate different kind of industry solutions, and I think we are making progress a little bit. What concerns me at this point is, as I've mentioned, the power consumption and generation. I'm concerned that this may be a tripping point for small industries like ourselves, because there will be one uh, point where we may not be able to afford the high cost of the power. And I think collectively, as a community, it is time to act, especially for small companies. Look at resources like solar power energies. I'm talking to a few smaller companies. If they are under one roof, so maybe they can come up with a solution whereby we can, collectively install solutions like solar power panels, and maybe we become less reliant on the grid, which is producing electricity at a higher cost.
Okay. I have just one kind of statement to say here, and I love technology and I love innovation, and I'm trying to get my head around it all the time. But there's a part of me that's still traditional, conventional thinking, thought process. I'm the previous generation. And I don't know what we're called because you guys are Gen Z, Gen X, Y, whatever, right? So for me, when we talk about innovation, it feels like it's a generation of also new products through the process of creativity, entrepreneurship, and then putting it into production and diffusing it more widely through increased channels, if you like. But I also wonder, is innovation a brief moment of creativity? What was done, job done, and then it's then all commercial. So when it comes to innovation, I sit on this side of the fence as well, thinking, is it just a fad? Is it something that can be contextualized to be something more regular, more consistent? How can that come through? How can it continually grow to be efficient and create better value? Sometimes I feel we might reinvent the wheel. And if I look at electric cars now, I see the abundance of value that they provide, but they still consume a lot of energy to produce, right? So are we reinventing the wheel? You know, yahan se hum bacha lekin yahan pe kharch kar rahe. Or even technology, you talked about using mobile phones, data centers that are being used, and then the power and energy that goes into cooling those units. So I'm always trying to get my head around that. And that's probably a conversation for another day. But tell me, do you feel as CEO of a company that adopting this particular SDG makes more sense given you're in the tech space? Or is this something that everyone should be looking at? Because we're always trying to innovate in terms of our products, our service offerings, even our sales communication. And also infrastructure always needs to be improved and enhanced. So we've got processes that exist, but maybe they can be enhanced to deliver better value internally for colleagues as well as externally for customers. What's your take on that? Do you think that companies should be looking at this particular SDG, or is it just for tech companies?
I think this is one particular SDG that no company or organization can ignore. As I said earlier in my talk, that this is probably the backbone of all the other SDGs. And probably it is the most measurable of them all, because you can actually measure the progress of most SDGs, most components of this particular SDG. The reason why, and it's not just about the tech companies, why we should look at it on a more serious note is, as I was trying to equate the development of a particular country with infrastructure is, some people would say it's kind of a paradox, but it isn't. But if for the last, I guess, 15 years, we've been trying to play catch up in terms of our energy needs. And there should be a thinking ahead, because if we are to grow, say, for example, 7% or 8% that we should be growing, considering that our population growth is about 2.3%, which is highest in the region, we need to grow at 5%. And to grow at 5%, there has to be a robust infrastructure in place. Tech companies like ourselves, all we need probably is electricity, air conditioning, computers, and internet access. At this point, I kind of pay for my personal 35 rupees per gigabyte. And a more sustainable connection would be 2,000 rupees per month. For a lot of people, it may be nothing. But when I look at it as a student, it may be half or maybe 30% of what he gets. That's huge. And we need to kind of look at it in a perspective that for tech companies, the infrastructure needs in the time of cloud computing and remote servers are essentially based on the machines and the internet connection mostly. But for non-tech companies, the reliance on infrastructure is even bigger. Kinza, I think, can speak more about it. If you're a large-scale manufacturing concern, then your reliance on power is much higher than that of a small tech company like ourselves. And this is probably reasons why companies like us should be focusing more on SDG 9 than any other SDG, I think.
Okay. Kinza, I'm going to move back over to you. What's your journey been like in trying to convince your colleagues and seniors that you need to adopt SDGs, or you should be considering SDGs, and then convincing them that this is the right SDG? What's been your journey? Did you just wake up one morning and say, boss, you can, and he's like, job done, TK Kinza? Zabardast. If only we all had bosses like that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, Zubair, denim is one of the most toxic fabrics in the textile industry.
Mm.
And for us, innovation, technology, infrastructure are the most important things at the moment.
Right.
So I can name you like a couple of machineries that we use in order to reduce the carbon footprint. Like we've invested in a machine we call EIM, Environmental Impact Measuring Tool, which measures the environmental impact of the textile industry garment finishing. The EIM scoring assesses the environmental impact of the firm's activity by calculating its consumption of water, energy, chemical use, and the impact it has on the health workers. Using a numerical ranking from 0 to 100. And as I said, EIM has become the world standard in global fashion industry. More than 50 brands are using it to improve their production. And of course, increase their transparency from the final consumer. And then we've got Tonello machines, which again, it has like a very low labor ratio with powerful nebulizing systems, reducing 80% of dyeing process. For example, traditionally, 400 liters usage has now been reduced to 80 liters. And while 70% of dye is recycled in the dyeing program, 30% of the dye used becomes a hard sludge. And we are basically finding alternatives using it in brick mortar. Okay. And then we've got our eco washers, which is like the premium service that we offer at Chottani Industries. And we've eliminated the use of harsh chemicals like potassium permanganate or stones. And then we've got another machinery, which is genealogia laser. And it's honestly, it's one of the smartest inventions so far. It saves us energy, water, less labor, and you can come up with like amazing textures on denim within like seconds, rather than the conventional methods where they were labor-intense methods, and laborers used to complain of tennis elbows. Again, there's no use of water energy, which is like saved by 80%. And then we've got digital machinery printing services, which is again eco-friendly. It's an eco-friendly process, requires no water or no harsh chemicals. And last but not least, we're investing in G2 ozone technology, which is the most advanced technology, eco-efficient. And by the whole process basically involves using air in the atmosphere, oxygen and ozone processes on garments by reacting with it with fiber dyes and giving it a more distressed look on the jeans, again, effortlessly. So accomplishing a zero discharge process, basically.
Okay, well, that's actually very helpful insight into the textile industry and obviously the role denim plays, not just in terms of the harm that it's potentially causing at the moment, but also the upside or the flip side in terms of the positive impact it can create, because we know denim is used so widely. Interesting also for us here at the Global Compact to learn then that there seems to be direct correlation of adopting an SDG to the bottom line. So we know when we talked about CSR in earlier conversations in previous years, the triple bottom line was referred to. But I can see from the investment that you've made and from use of your vernacular in terms of reduction in energy consumption or reduction in waste, you're already making a net zero benefit. So you can see the return on investment effectively of what you're doing on the SDGs. Anis, how has that worked for you? I mean, because obviously you're different in terms of company and you don't necessarily have heavy equipment or heavy machinery. Have you seen the net value of adopting this particular SDG in terms of upside on your margins or perhaps revenue streams? To unmute.
Okay, one of the the upside, when a particular component of this particular SDG is innovation. And we consider ourselves as one of the most innovative companies of the last 5 years. Uh, we would like to believe that we are one of those who came up with an original technology, that is the artificially intelligent powered content generation software that we have developed. The short story of that is, since I have a background in media and I used to work as the editor of one of the leading channels in Pakistan, I started looking at ways and means of making a software that can write content by itself. Fast forward 5 years, in 2016, my software started writing, 2, 3 lines of content by itself, and the rest, as they say, is history. So we are on a path of innovations. I was in US when this COVID outbreak was witnessed by the world. I came back on March of 2020, which was like probably the last flight out of US. And then I started working with my team on a bot that can be used for early diagnosis of COVID. And it was probably the first bot that was made in Pakistan for the early diagnosis of this disease. And after that, I think the government itself adopted some of the work that we did, and the other organization also adopted to this artificial intelligence technology to find some of the stuff that has been done for detecting COVID. And if you can have a software, AI powered software, which can be used to detect COVID at the early stages, it can actually save a lot of lives. And we try to contribute in that. So innovation is one thing that we try to excel in, and that's probably the one of the uh, pillars on which any industry is built. We also try to encourage innovations in different parts of our industry, encourage young students, software engineers, to make software using artificial intelligence, machine learning, in trying to make certain solutions. You asked a question before. Uh, in my view, innovation is more about solving problems. It has to be. Uh, on its own, an invention or innovation may not stand a lot of ground, but if it is focused toward a particular problem of society, of industry, at any level, and
So
it is solving it.
I want to interject exactly then. So I want to ask you a question, if I may, and please continue. Relating to Kinza's area of work, right? So I want to see if I can connect the dots here. So I completely agree with you. I think innovation stems from wanting, and that's where the SDGs derive from, wanting to solve the world's issues. I wouldn't call them necessarily problems. And it's relative, because the problems or the issues in a country like Pakistan are different to the issues and problems in a country like England or perhaps other parts of Europe. However, there are similar issues and troubles as well. So food poverty is an issue in Western Europe as it is in Pakistan. So I understand that the will to solve an issue drives innovation. But what if you don't realize that there's a need to solve an issue, or that there's an issue? So I want to use Kinza, if I may, your denim product as an issue, and the damage that it was doing before you were innovative. How would someone like Kinza in her organization, who's changing the world through fashion and bringing us wonderful products and services, and then she doesn't realize that actually her denim is causing any harm. So there's no innovation required, right? The only innovation is around reducing costs and increasing margins, or perhaps something else further than that. And there's a bit of a disconnect, because that organization hasn't realized that there's any harm being caused by their product, because they never needed to find out. So how can we plug that gap? How can we bridge that divide that helps us all realize or reflect on our products and services, however big or small we are, and think, CSR तो अपनी जगह है, वो society के लिए काम करे, but let's look at our products, our services, our infrastructure, and see what is the impact of what we're doing. Is that something that can? Yeah, I mean, what's your thought on that? Let me ask you, and then
that's a really, really good question, Jaber. I not only I work in the CSR, but I'm working in the trading side of the business as well. So being a textile designer, that's like it would be really ignorant to be not connected to the whole world globally. I mean, that's what you learn from the trading markets, from trends, from what's required by the consumer on the other side. And literally the future of textile industry is the integration of sustainable design techniques and developing good products and respecting the environment. So that's like an ethos that's like followed by the world globally. And like I said, I'd be living in a cave right now.
I'm going to come back to you in a moment because I want to take Anissa's view on that. What's your thought? If, let's say, Kinza didn't know about her responsible direction, she was oblivious to everything. What's your view? How would you convince someone like who doesn't have the realization that their products are causing harm to be innovative? Because there's no need to be innovative, right?
Okay, there are three factors which would constitute a problem within the industry. The first factor is the overriding cost. That's commercial in nature. Second is, of course, more profits. And third may be an issue which is pertaining to, for example, environment, that another agency, which is not necessarily within the organization, or external agency, can identify. So that would constitute a problem within the industry or the company, which the company, for example, Kinza's company, needs to address. For example, if there is something which is causing some kind of environmental unrest, and it has been identified either within the company of any technical audit of nature, or an external organization, which can be any organization, and then they help that organization, which is in this case Kinza's company, to address it. Once they realize there is a problem, then they look at solutions. Companies like us usually stem from domain knowledge of a particular industry. Like myself, I am from media and I understand financial industry. So I understand their problems better than other industries. So I can identify a particular problem within, for example, financial sector, and I can go and talk to like maybe 20, 30 people. If there really is a problem, it is big enough to make a solution which can be useful. It can be identified. You can buy it. It's commercially viable. And once we know that there is a problem that exists, and this is the kind of you can say the extent at which the organization will go to pay for it, this is where you make the decision of making a solution of it. Maybe there is a solution already existing, and you may just play around a little bit to suit the particular need of your potential or present client in Pakistan. But that's how it goes.
And perhaps also, Anis, maybe there's actually no problem or there's no issue to address. Maybe it's just that there's enhancement of the value or the impact of something. So obviously for those people listening in, we're not saying that a particular company is always doing bad. What we're saying here is that there's an opportunity to reflect, look internally and see, is my product causing damage to the environment, for example, or damage to my stakeholder community? Or is my product already doing good, and is there a way I can enhance it? And perhaps, what I'm suggesting here is that perhaps all companies should look at, self-reflection in terms of business infrastructure, products and services, obviously resources. And maybe that's where not that I'm promoting it here, but it's timely to mention it. Maybe then that's when the SDG baseline assessment could be undertaken, and a company can see, are we actually causing issue or are we bettering something? And let's see if we are causing issue, then how can we address that? And if we're bettering something, how can we do it even better so we can do more of it, and how can we bring other people onto that journey? So I think it makes for, you know, a valid point that you mentioned, Denise and Kinza as well, that you've got to look at what it is that you're providing. And obviously you talked about longevity. It's got to make business and commercial sense also. And that's where the term sustainability comes from. I think it's probably, we pinched it from you guys in the private sector. You know, you probably use sustainability in a different context, more around finance and profit, but it seems to fit now for everything. And one of the things that I want to touch upon, get sort of thoughts from both of you, is from some of the targets that are set within this particular SDG. Obviously, we talked about upgrading capabilities of industrial sectors, and Kinza, you gave a fantastic example of reinvesting and investing in what you're doing so that you can really create that resilient infrastructure that a lesser developed country like Pakistan has. And not only are you sort of helping your company grow, you're actually impacting directly on the economic infrastructure and capabilities of the country. But one of the things that I want to sort of highlight is that what's the access to smaller companies or small scale industrial enterprises if everything, for example, in Kinza, your example, that innovation comes from knowing your market because you've got the reach and the scope and the facilities and the infrastructure already in place. You've got the network and the contacts, and clearly you have the budgets available or signed off at least to reinvest or invest better in new technologically advanced products that help you also reduce your costs going forward. How can organizations like you support the wider industrial side of things in a developing country like Pakistan by creating support mechanism? Do you have any thoughts on that? And I'm not asking you to make a commitment or a pledge or reveal what your company is doing, but just to get some idea, because I know we've got smaller scale companies and enterprises listening in today, and will be sort of listening in or watching the broadcast later. What can we do collectively, basically, to help them leverage the work that you're doing? Because otherwise, all I see happening is that aap aage nikal jayenge and you'll be really super advanced and you'll be changing the world through eco-friendly denim, and also your case, at least with AI. And then bahut sare chote companies will be left behind who are still using 50-year-old machinery that's got its own issues and climate impact as well. So what do you think we can do collectively to help move that goalpost forward?
That's a really good question. There are like a couple of things. When you talk about like doing collective work, there are like two aspects of this: either working alongside for the environment and the community over here. So when we talk about that, we've been doing a lot of work. We partnered with WWF Pakistan on various CSI initiatives, including working on climate changing programs, conservation of biodiversity, sustainable cotton growing programs in Pakistan, because importing cotton is becoming very expensive. And we're working on building education systems, improving the livelihoods of farmers. And we're also going into urban forestation in the city. So we're teaming up with NED and KMC, and the project's underway. And we're working on different technology, like for instance, biodegradable tags that you can grow into your own vegetables. With regards to more collaborative work with the textile industries and small industries, that needs to be, those are initiatives that need to be taken by the government, really, to be honest, in my opinion, because that's like a very long route to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. Anis, what's your view on supporting collectively?
As I said earlier in the start of this conversation, where we lack, and I seriously think that we are really lagging behind is innovation, unfortunately. Uh, if you Google right now and try to Google top inventions from Pakistan or original technologies from Pakistan, there'll be less than 10. And one of those would be Dr. Mahbubul Haq from Jawal Haq's era, 1980s. It means that we don't necessarily have enough contributions towards science, technology, and innovation as we should have for a country of population of around 220 million.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, innovation has something to do with your culture. And we are not pro innovation inside our culture. We have this safe going approach towards our children. We say, go get a job in a bank. And not that I have any disrespect for having a job at the bank. I'm just quoting it as an example. Get a job somewhere, a good industry, and don't do anything out of the box. And this approach actually hurting us. So what we are doing here is on forums like these and other forums, when I speak to people, speak to students, go to universities, we have been at NIC, which is in NED, and we have been extremely encouraging to students, which have, or at least are trying to work on ideas which are out of the ordinary. It may not result in good products right away, but at least we can encourage people to, go forward, do something which can at least be useful in some kind of innovative thinking. That's one thing we do. Uh, the problem with Pakistan here is, for example, if I look at last 8 to 10 years, if I have to list some of the original technologies coming from Pakistan would be, I know my friends from DevTalk, they've done some work on it. I Automate Ejaz, I know is my friend who has a program in Austin with me. Uh, Cheyenne Swale Server is my friend. I'm sure you know about Pipeter, the water filter that he has made. And Pani Wali Gadi. I'm sure you all remember that. Pani Wali Gadi, according to Dr. Athar Osama, has damaged Pakistan's landscape of innovations. What happened is we started labeling this person as a fraud, and that kind of discouraged people taking step towards innovation. And I have heard this insult twice that your AI writer that you're making, ye pani wali gadi to nahi hai. And this is what our scientists should have done on television when they were talking about pani wali gadi. Dr. Thalsam also said that. Suggest a test. If it is valid, it should pass that test. And that's the way to handle scientific innovations or inventions. You suggest test. If the test fails, fine. If you have made something, you've invented something and it didn't work, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a fraud. It means that you tried something and didn't work out. So that's the kind of culture we as a community, I as an individual, we as a company are trying to project, that innovation is a key factor in making progress in business and an economy for any country. And this, I think, collectively, we all should be looking at and work together.
Yeah.
We can encourage people to, make something new, innovate something, uh, take a few risks. Something might actually work out.
I think you've hit on a pretty poignant point there. And I think that's probably not even a webinar, that's probably an in-person part of a summit conversation about the cultural context of developing countries. And, are countries like Pakistan actually discouraged from outside sources, and I'm not citing conspiracy theories here, discouraged to innovate because it's detrimental to current world order? The cultural mindset that you talked about, and I'm pretty familiar and au fait with that. My parents still want me to go and get a job, and I'm in this entrepreneurial space, and we'll get there years of it, so I still have to deal with that. So I completely hear where you're coming from. But I think also, part of that conversation is that there's no parallel we can draw at the moment. So, my generation and my parents' generation go to safe space. So you get pata naukri milegi shayad jaisa bhi ho, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever the hours are. at the end of the month, you get X. Now, we know that sometimes those jobs aren't right for us, or sometimes they're not the best for us. And maybe there are other options to take, but we can't draw a comparison because there haven't been enough innovators and inventors, like you said, or success stories. We only hear of the big ones. And when we hear of the big ones, we also run the risk of saying, well, what the war here, na, hum ye hai. So we lack confidence as well. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that from everyone. And I welcome and encourage those conversations and be delighted to play a role in that from what we can do at the GCNP to help facilitate that or to instigate that or to create a hub. So let's park that one and have that conversation. And, you know, it relates to a question we received on the chat group and also on Twitter as well about, you know, organizations in Pakistan are slow to adopt new technologies. So we get there's some inherent challenges and how it affects our future. If we were to look at this particular SDG and link it to the way the SDGs have been constructed, if I put it that way, is that they interlink and interlock with each other. So if you do, you know, if you work on SDG 5, there's a direct correlation to another SDG, you know, perhaps health and well-being. Or if you work on SDG 10, reducing inequalities, you're invariably going to impact on SDG 5 or SDG 1. What do you feel as people leading this in your organizations, or which SDG would you like to additionally work alongside, linking what you're doing on SDG 9 to another SDG? Is there something that comes off the hat, you know, top of your mind? This you know, this 9 is priority because it impacts every part of the business, but maybe there's another one that we feel we could like to link it to, because there are a lot of companies out there that we work with when we do our conversations, but also when we talk to them about setting a roadmap for the future towards 2030. They say, "Ek agar hum kar lenge to 16 baki hai." We're saying, you know, small steps, and there are 160 plus indicators behind all of them. So even if you adopt 9, this SDG 9, there's still 10 indicators behind it. So you're actually busy for the next 2 years, in my view. तो उनको ज़रा reassurance देने के लिए या giving them encouragement as well that look, they all interconnect. You can do more than one, you can do all of them if you want, but don't spread yourself thin. You know, champion one, make it work for your business, integrate it, adopt it, champion it, and then look at what else matches with what you're doing, or pick something that's completely aside from your business. You just want to do it from a passion. So, Anis, what's your next SDG that you would like to champion?
So as I've mentioned, I'm friends with Cheyenne with server. So I always wanted to work with water, you know, clean water. I think it is still, and it will be, one of the major challenges for humanity in years to come.
Yeah.
The second thing or third thing that I would like to work upon, and I think indirectly every commercial organization is working, is the elimination of poverty. Because if you are successful as a commercial enterprise and you aim not just to make profit, but to make people's lives better. And one of the way of doing is at least at a limited level, what you can do is, to the extent possible, work on eradicating poverty, either by empowering them with knowledge, technical abilities, or you can encourage them to start their own enterprise businesses. That will go a long way, improving lives of people and improving the entire country's economy.
What you're effectively saying is that CEOs, entrepreneurs, or business leaders, all shapes and sizes, should be driven by purpose. So profit and purpose can be aligned, because paise banayenge to zyada achhe kaam kar sakte hain, not CSR, above and beyond that.
Yes.
But you talk about creating opportunities for other people, but sometimes that's easier said than done. So what you want to alleviate poverty. What do you think you could do in your capacity? And again, please don't think of this as a commitment or a bas aapne keh diya to aap yahi karenge. We're trying to inspire people who are listening in and watching us so that they can think, acha, oh, I didn't think of that. And these platforms now, thanks to technology, really enable us to kind of go outside the conventional kind of meeting that we'd have in the meeting room and just like punch question and tuck get answers and that's it. So in terms of thinking of how we can inspire people, if you had the opportunity that you could move goal one forward as well, and you talked about creating opportunities for people with micro enterprises or whatever that may be, or getting people off the breadline, what do you think you would do after this call? What would be the one thing that you could do or would like to do?
I would say imparting technical knowledge, for example.
Right.
We live in a world with endless possibilities. And not just that I'm a Pakistani, I sincerely believe that we are an intelligent nation. And I really, really have seen evidences of that. And I actually do that. I speak to people, students, I encourage them to take up their own enterprises. And I kind of work in making them realize that the technology is there now for everyone. Most of it is open source, or even if you have to buy a software somewhere, it's there for everyone. There are resources out there that you can take benefit of, and make yourself empowered in terms of knowledge. Once you are there, sky is the limit. And if it suits your natural appetite.
I want to interject here just deliberately because a question was पहले किसी ने पूछ लिया था, so I'm going to rephrase it. But ये तो कहना आसान है ना कि ठीक है उनसे बात कर ली आप, you've empowered them, you've encouraged them and stuff, but it's this, right? This that everyone's after कि poverty का alleviate करनी है, कुछ लोगों के ज़हन में ये है. Some people have the mindset that pay someone, right? To alleviate poverty, someone needs to have a job. I don't necessarily agree with that in its entirety because there are other aspects as well. But if that's the mindset, and you go back to culture that you were talking about before, if that's a mindset, and I get it, and I really do get the value of what you're talking about. But जो आम आदमी है सोचे है बस मुझे तो नौकरी चाहिए या मुझे काम दे. How do you move that person or inspire that person other than just conversation and inspiration? How would you say, or can you, is that the right thing to do? I don't even know, because then there's due diligence and everything else, right? So how do we move the needle forward?
मेरा एक बंगाली दोस्त था, तो वो कहता था कि because उनकी जो कल्चर वो है कंपटीशन, कि कभी किसी को मछली पकड़ के मत दो, मछली पकड़ना सिखा दो.
Teach a man to fish.
Okay, so this is what I believe sincerely. As far as creating jobs is concerned, every commercial organization, if we are moving forward and we are successful commercially, we will be creating jobs. There are no two ways about it. We will be imparting with employment to those who...
And then also your supplier stakeholder network grows as well, right? So you'll require products and services yourself, right?
Yeah, of course. But that's not it. I believe the path that I've taken myself, the opportunities are unlimited, especially in the tech arena. And I try to encourage people to look at them with the perspective that they can actually make solutions on their own. It doesn't take much. I am a person of average intelligence, maybe below that. I'm pretty sure there are more intelligent people out there. They just don't have the courage, maybe, to take up a challenge of that nature. If they can do that, I am always there to support them. I actually sometimes individually take classes for technical languages like Python, PHP. I try to teach them as well. So that's what I do. But in its totality, I think the best thing is that you encourage people to take up challenges, especially in the tech arena.
And I like what you said. It's about giving people courage, and I think if we can give that collectively, then we'll see it a shift. Kinza, what's your next SDG, or which is the SDG you'd like to align with other than number 9?
I think, Zubair, if I wish I could just champion all of them, really, to be honest, it's like working towards the social constructs in the society over here, especially in Pakistan, because, firstly, we need to save water. I truly feel that we're exporting water when we're doing garments. And secondly, I think it would be educating women in our society. So we do have like a couple of our programs, or we've adopted one of those TCF schools, and we've endorsed in the systems, educational systems, that community service is really important. We have beach cleaning drives that happen every month, and we try to educate young children to come forward and clean the beaches, and we're finding like plastic solutions. And we're in talk with the trade the trade industry of Pakistan. So finding solutions for profit. And then we have like programs to train young women in the secondary education level, where we can allocate funds for them for the universities,
right,
or formal education. Yeah.
All right, well, that's quite a lot. And like we were saying before, there are companies that want to do all of the SDGs, and I'm really inspired by the desire and the will and the passion to solve all of the issues of the world. And it's no small task. So credit to you for having the courage to think that far ahead. We're almost at the end of our session today. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you, and we shouldn't let the conversation stop here. But I want us all to pause for a moment of reflection. It's been a pretty tough couple of years for everyone all around the world. But one thing that I've seen is that it's brought us all closer together. And there's also been renewed vigor for wanting to do more good, whether that be individuals supporting friends and family through asking how they are and their health and well-being, mental health well-being, to businesses who are now driven through purpose and wanting to do more through their infrastructure and products and services, due to the innovation that you guys have talked about. So just take a moment to reflect on the year perhaps gone by, but also cast your mind ahead to 2030. And I ask this of all my guests on our sessions, because I think it's really helpful to give us a deep dive into your heart and the vision that you have, not just for your company, but also where you see yourself taking the SDGs. And it's basically to ask you, imagine yourself waking up on the 1st of January 2030. You step out of your room, you overlook the window, you see Karachi, Islamabad, Lahore, wherever you are in front of you. You have a lovely cup of chai, coffee, pani in your hand, green juice in some cases in your hand. What is the world that you see on the 1st of January 2030? Kinza, you first.
I think I'd like to see a lot of trees, a lot of nature, people happy, less poverty. I think women educated, but a more greener community. That's
5 SDGs. That's 5 SDGs that Mark is the champion. And Anis, what's your 2030 1st of January looking like? And the question is, will you be drinking coffee or tea?
I'm a coffee person through and through, so it would be black coffee for me. Close to what Kinza said, greener Islamabad, because Islamabad has lost some of its greenery actually lately. I don't like that. But I would like to see a more developed Pakistan in terms of infrastructure, technology. I would like to see people progressing, poverty eradicated, and maybe a country which has contributed significantly in the development of the entire world, hopefully.
Okay, fantastic. Wow. The big task ahead for both of you guys, right? And I think aap log shayad milke bhi kuch kaam kar sakte hain. So watch this space. So just want to say thank you, Anis, and thank you, Kinza, for joining us today on this live in conversation, SDG 9. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you and also talking with you about some of your journey sharing your insights and also the challenges that you've faced along the way. But I think the great inspirational points have been noted, and people listening in have got something to work from. So whether you're at the start of your SDGs journey and you're thinking about which SDGs to adopt, or you've already started your SDGs journey and you're thinking how you can enhance and accelerate what you're doing, maybe you've heard some things that will be helpful. Maybe there's opportunities to reach out to both Kinza and Ejaz and partner with them as well. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today, taking your time. I'd like to thank all of our listeners who are listening in now and those that will watch later for your time, your comments, your posts. And once again, if you're sharing on social media, don't forget to hashtag Uniting Business and GCNP. Share your thoughts with us about what you'd like to hear from our next guest. We're back first Wednesday of October on SDG 10. Ahead of that, we have the General Assembly, so we'll be doing a breakout session. I'm not sure what topic is yet, that's yet to be allocated, but that enables Pakistani businesses to once again share their thoughts and insights with a global community. And for any other information regarding SDG Me, the baseline assessment, events, our SDG roadshows that we'll be resuming shortly, and any other bits and pieces that you think you need help and support with, feel free to reach out to any one of us here at the Global Compact Network Pakistan. And that's it, that's a wrap. Thank you very much, guys, and inshallah we'll speak soon. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you so much, Zubair. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.